Thank you for joining us, and many thanks to our guest for staying up so late to be with us. I am Steve Taylor, a member of the Society of Professional Journalists Washington, D.C. Pro Chapter. Welcome to our program entitled Covering Refugees and Migrants from Inside. We've got an expert on that subject. Before we start our discussion, there are some housekeeping items to cover. Please use the chat feature to let us know where you are from. The international community of the Society of Professional Journalists is dedicated to promoting press freedom globally and helping American journalists better understand the close links between global and local events. We also want to bring together journalists from around the world to better understand the conditions and issues facing us all. The aim of these IC talks is to connect journalists at a time when it's difficult to do so in person. With these one-on-one conversations, we aim to dig a little deeper and create an opportunity to have direct access to journalists and experts around the world. We hope you learn, grow, and take from today information that will help and inspire you in your work. The format is simple. The guest and I will have a conversation. We have the chat and Q&A features open. If along the way, during the discussion, you have a question, please use that Q&A function. The co-chair of the international community, Dan Kubisky, he and I will keep an eye on that window. Please let us know if you want to ask a question directly of our guest, or if you would prefer I read it for you. And please, for the sake of our limited time, keep your questions brief. Dan will also be keeping an eye on the chat window in case you have any questions about SPJ, the international community, or have technical issues. This talk is being recorded and will be placed in our YouTube channel. For most Americans, the issue of migration and refugees is about the southern border of the United States, but of course it's much more than that. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees estimates about 79 million people have been forced to flee their homes. Of that group, about a third are under the age of 18. Specific to our guest, Greece, with a population of 11 million, is currently home to more than 50,000 refugees, mostly from Afghanistan and Syria. To put that in perspective for our American audience, the current limit to refugees allowed into the US is 15,000. That is down from 30,000 last year. Our population is 330 million. Our guest is in Athens, Greece. And again, we thank you for staying up so late to be with us. It's about 1 a.m. there, right?
Yeah.
Stavros Malichudis is an investigative reporter for Solomon, for which he covers migration and refugee issues. In 2019, he was a fellow for the Balkan Fellowship for Journalistic Excellence. That same year, he attended a data journalism program at Columbia University, thanks to a Stavros Niarchos Foundation scholarship. Solomon is an Athens-based independent investigative digital media outlet founded in 2016. Not only does Solomon arrange on-the-ground reporting on migration and refugees, it also provides free media training to refugees and migrants so they can produce their own stories. Stavros, welcome.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you very much.
That awful photograph from 5 years ago, a little boy face down on wet sand, dead on a beach in Turkey. He and his family were trying to escape civil war in Syria. The boat they used might well have capsized off the shores of Greece. Alan Kurdi was the child's name. How many migrants faced the kind of danger he faced?
I would say that the vast majority of them. So it's very like the people arriving in Greece. Usually the majority would be, as you said, from Syria and Afghanistan. And it would be very common that even if they didn't experience some traumatic experience back in their home country, and they were, lucky enough to live on time, what happens is that very, very often they would experience something very dangerous along the way. So as they are crossing borders with the traffickers, we hear a lot of stories of abuse, of beatings, of stabbings, of rapes. So even if somebody didn't have already some very, very traumatic experience, which many of the people arriving in Greece do, also refugees arriving from sub-Saharan countries, they have a lot of stories of torture usually to mention. This could be on the way, like as it happened with Alan Kurdi. crossing the boat. Usually the boats are some very, very, how do you say, like some very, very not appropriate to host the 35 people that usually fit in there. They would maybe be appropriate for 5 or 6 people, but then they stack on them, I don't know, 35 people. And it's quite often that shipwrecks like this one probably happened.
Is this problem getting worse or better, would you say?
The issue is that Greece has been trying to control the borders better than before with the aid of Frontex, the European Border Agency. So in a way, there are better controls in the borders, the sea borders and the land borders. But that also means that people who are in need and they will take the decision to try to cross the border, they will have to make more difficult choices, and they will be also more dependent on the traffickers. So in this kind of danger, it has gotten worse.
When you say they are in an effort to control the borders, does that mean people are turned back when they get to Greece?
So the Greek government for a very long time have been responding that this doesn't take place in our borders. This is a practice which is prohibited by international law. International law and EU law says that somebody has the right to, when they arrive in Greece, they have a right to apply to asylum, and then they either get accepted or not. What has been happening for quite a long time, and it's much more obvious in the past year, I would say, is that very often the boats arriving from Turkey, from the Turkish water, they are either not allowed to enter the Greek territory, or something more disturbing, I would say, is that there are many reports that people arrive in Greece, they arrive in the Greek islands, which are usually some kilometers away from the Turkish shores. And then there are many reports also with videos and photos and geolocations that these people are taken from where they landed. They are transported to some boats which allegedly belong to the Greek Coast Guard, and then these people are detected and reported to be back in Turkey. So there is a process in between, and these people end up in Turkey.
And how does Turkey treat them?
Usually, if they have registered there already, they will just let them after a few days, and they will try again. I mean, it depends. Each case could be different. It depends on the connections you would have, the kind of money you would have to spend. But it's quite common that people have arrived in Greek islands, they have been turned back in Turkey, and then they have been trying again to come back. There is a rumor among the refugees that we meet, especially when it matters the land borders, that each refugee to successfully pass into Greece, they have to have an average number of 7 efforts. And this is something we hear a lot, like from trusted people also. Yeah.
Now, we talked about them coming from Afghanistan and from Syria. Those are both places of civil war at this point.
Yeah.
Are they returned to those places?
No, they're not returned to those places. They're returned back to Turkey, and that's where when they will start again to try to get back.
So Turkey will allow them to
try again, I would say.
Or why don't they stay in Turkey then?
Because Turkey has already been hosting more than 3 million refugees. So usually what happens is that the people that are coming in Greece, they maybe have spent some time in Turkey working. So many of the Afghans and the Syrians people who have met, they have stayed maybe even for more than 1 year or maybe 2 years in Syria, where they usually work under exploitation, receiving very, very low salaries. And then there's some point when they decide that, okay, I have to try for something better. Sometimes they work on these factories in Turkey just so that they can pay their traffickers. They make an agreement that they have to work for some months. And when they pay the traffickers, then they can try again to come to Greece.
Talk to me, if you will, about the conditions in the refugee camps in Greece.
Yeah. So they started to flourish, I would say, in 2015. There were many of them because at this point, the north borders from Greece and the rest of Europe, they were still open. So there were many people arriving. They would stay for some small period of time in the refugee camps, and then they would continue their trip up north. So this is some kind of temporary accommodation. That's what the name of them is. It's temporary. In the period of time, in the span of time, they have grown to be, like kind of a normality. It's 5 years since this all began. Many of these structures were built then. I mean, I would say that we experience things that we wouldn't really expect to see in Europe, like in the continent, and with so much money allocated. It's approximately 3 billion euros that have been allocated to Greece in the past years. And for example, in Lesbos Island, where is Moria camp, the most infamous camp of Greece, the people we're talking to, they still have to take showers with bucket showers, like outside some makeshift shower. I mean, after all this money, this is a bit worrying. People we talk to, they literally say that they get sick because they shower in the open, and then they get sick for 2 or 3 days. I think this could have been avoidable. It's not a phenomenon that we experienced that started yesterday. It's something that we have been preparing ourselves for 5 years and have been receiving some good chunk of money for this also.
Talk to you in a moment about reporting on it, but I had one other question about the overall situation. How are the migrants received on arrival? Are they welcomed? Do they run into angry crowds?
I would say that, like, when this all started, people were more welcoming because this is when it all started. So people in the islands, for example, it's 5 islands in the Aegean Sea that have been receiving the majority of the arrivals. People there in the beginning, like in the first years, they were very, very accommodating and very welcoming, and they were very warm to people, because that's also an issue that maybe they wouldn't like me too much that I mentioned it, but because they knew that they wouldn't stay there. So they knew that these are people in need. They have to cross from here. We will help them sometimes, and then they will leave. Now in the islands, specifically in the islands, things are very, very tense. So there's a very strong anti-migrant feeling, anti-migrant sentiment, which I would say is not only present in the like far-right people, but it has become also some kind of normalized. At the same time, there is also a big solidarity movement to people, and Greeks also, they have their own history of having experienced what being a refugee means. So there's a big part of the people that are still helping and are still very welcoming to them, and I think that there is this kind of people also.
Tell us about your reporting. Where do you go, and where do you file?
So for the moment, we are kind of stuck in Athens. I am also stuck in Athens. We have a lockdown going on, so
because of the coronavirus, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. So it's been almost a month since we went into our second lockdown, because things are not going very well here. And the other issue is that people also in the refugee camps, they are not allowed to exit now because of the same safety reasons. Usually, so we report a lot from the mainland. We have our connections in refugee camps in the mainland and the islands, and I would say that sometimes a year we also try to go like to Lesbos, which is the most prominent example of how the refugee situation is evolving. I was there back in September when the fire destroyed Moira camp, but I was planning to go back this month, but I haven't been able yet, because even if I go there, there's no possibility for the people to come outside of the camp to talk to us, and journalists are not allowed to enter the new camp. So it's still like WhatsApp and Viber at the moment.
When you're there, especially when there's a crisis like a fire in the camp, who do you talk to?
Like for my case, it's one thing we do in Solomon is that we work very close with the communities, with the refugee communities. So when I got there, like in the day after the fire, we had already the people that we know and we care for. It's our friends and or our sources in other scale. So in my case, I stayed there for approximately 20 days, and I was among the community. I was with the refugees who were the victims of the fire, and they stayed in the street for around a week before going to the new camp. We do a lot in Solomon, and what I think is maybe different from other approaches is that our priority is to have contact with the community themselves, like the people from the refugee community themselves. So these are the first people that we would talk to, and these are the people that we maintain a relationship with. And these are the people in the end that know that they can trust us when they have an issue and they want to report something or they want to pass some information.
What is the pandemic situation in the camps, by the way, and how do you keep yourself healthy?
Yeah, that's a great paradox. Like you have orders and guidelines to keep distance or to wash your hands. And when this all began, especially in March, we're talking about places that it's practically impossible to keep a distance. It's the camps are usually like a tent next to a tent and next to a tent and next to a tent, and it's people living in horrible conditions. You would see rats among them. You would see the place getting full of water when it rains. You wouldn't see proper hygiene conditions. At the moment, people in the camps are also they are obliged to wear a mask, which is the paradox is that if they don't wear a mask, they get a fine, and they are fined for 150 euros. And this is money that they don't have. It's unclear how they will pay for it or how they will do it. And it's also, it's from my point of view, it's quite. I wouldn't say that it's normal to demand from people to keep distance and to stay healthy during this pandemic at the moment when it's December and they don't even have access to a shower. That's what I think.
We said before that Solomon, your organization, provides free media training to the refugees and migrants to produce their own stories. How does that work?
Yeah. We have done 4 series of such labs. So this all began from an approach that says that it's okay that Stavros, for example, reports about refugees, but it would be maybe even more important that somebody from their own community can do it. Because among the people that are arriving in Greece, there are also skilled media professionals. There are people who used to work as journalists back in their country or as photographers. Okay. So we think also not only from an ethical point of view, but also from a practical point of view, it's more useful that these people cover the issues of their own communities themselves. And the other things that they know them better, they don't have the cultural gap that I would have maybe when reporting for a community that I need to get closer with. And this is also an answer, in our opinion, that can be given to not only integration but also to a professional career for these people, because as it matters, professional opportunities or the opportunity to get in the real job market for the refugees and migrants, this is something that doesn't really exist in Greece. It's not. So we have done storytelling and photography and video and some shorter labs, and I think it's very useful for them, but for us also, because we all want to get closer as a community also.
Tell me some of the stories they tell when they get the chance.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Thanks. It wasn't mine. It came from one of our viewers.
Okay. What's nice for them, like what's nice for us also to see, is how they describe. I remember a photography story. How they describe what life before used to look like before for them. Because for us, it's usual that we have this impression that, like, the identity of the refugee seems to cover all the rest of the identities that one person can be part of. So there was this photo story that showed like life in Syria before the war and life how it was, and trying to combine with the view of a newcomer arriving in Greece. I found this interesting. They have done some videos also. With the storytelling, it has been quite of an issue to come closer to. So usually we write content in English and in Greek, and there have been some like Arabic and Farsi texts that we have translated in English. Then I think that's easier for them.
We have another question from a viewer about, first of all, is it possible for a journalist, say a freelancer in the United States who says, that's a story that I want to cover, can that be done? Could I hop on a plane and go somewhere and cover this story now?
What kind of story do you mean? Like
the stories you're talking about, but to do it as an American coming from an American organization or as an American freelance journalist to sell to stories in the States, but to be on the scene there.
Yeah. So one issue that is, what is a reality here is that the rates for freelancers, they are very, very low. So I wouldn't say that if you were a Greek journalist, it would have an economic, a financial meaning for you to jump on a plane and go to Lesbos, because you would never get the money that you paid for the, air ticket, even from the story that you sold to some outlet. The rates are very low. It's like you would have maybe 100 to 150 euros per piece. This piece could be a long form. It could be a piece that you have worked on for months or for weeks or even for 1 week. Even it's very little money compared to the work that you have put into. So what has been happening a lot, and we saw it a lot during the boom, of the refugee crisis, but we see it now also, is that the skilled journalists and photojournalists who are able to work with foreign media, they will work with foreign media. So it's also one paradox that we get informed about things that happen in the Greek islands, mostly from media reports from international outlets than from Greek outlets, because the Greek outlet will be very, very hesitant to even pay for you to go for 3 days to Lesbos to report from there. Yeah.
Wouldn't be out of the question, though, for an American news organization, particularly somebody who's watching and listening to you right now, saying we ought to get on this story and then go on over there. Would it be possible? And find an experienced foreign correspondent, but one who perhaps doesn't have credentials there. I'm not talking about a credential story, but is there anybody doing that coming from another country where you don't have to worry about the Greeks paying them, but they want the story?
Like if there are international journalists working on these kind of stories, you mean? Yeah, there are many.
But on a freelance basis.
Yeah, there are many on a freelance basis, and there's also quite a number of international journalists based in Athens. So I would say that like major foreign media, I would say like The Guardian, Al Jazeera, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, they also like commission to freelance writers who are based here. So, for example, when the fire in Moria happened in September, there were many international journalists, freelancers, who are based in Greece. So they cover Greece, but on a freelance basis for different media outlets. Yeah.
Who are your readers, Stavros? Who's your audience?
That's also a very interesting question. Like on the first level, we hope that it's also people from the refugee communities themselves and from the humanitarian sector. So we see that a big chunk of our readers are in some kind related to the sector that we are covering. It would be refugees and it would be humanitarians. And then you could see that it's mostly, I would say, what we understand also from the comments that we receive, it's mostly people who are welcoming to refugees or people who are in some kind tired of how journalism is done in Greece, how it's tied to interests, how it's used to not to highlight issues, but usually to cover them. So it's also people that we know that they don't necessarily agree with our view of things, but they respect that it's done with honesty. We have we publish in Greek and in English, so a big number of our readers are abroad. We have from many European countries, from the US, from Norway, from Germany. These are European countries, Portugal and Spain. These are European countries that there are still many people who are interested to read about what's happening regarding the refugees in Greece. So we have lots of, like from many different countries.
And when you say publishing it, you mean on the Solomon website, is that right?
Yeah, right.
Any other news organizations, newspapers, television pick up your stories?
Sometimes they have been mentioned, like in the Greek Parliament, like by questions done from like members of the Parliament. Our latest story was it was called the Logbook of Moria. So this is one notebook that I found after the fire, which was written from the people who were there to take care of the unaccompanied minors. So it writes in the first-hand experience of how dangerous and how problematic the conditions there were. For this story, we collaborated with Reporters United. It's a Greek investigative journalist network, and Investigate Europe. Investigate Europe is it's a team of experienced reporters from many European countries, I think from 9 different European countries. And what they do is that they will pick a topic and they will start researching on it, each from their country, and then they will start collaborating with media partners. So we collaborated with these 2 partner organizations, and then we published, besides our websites, it was published in the Tagesspiegel in Germany and Vice in Germany, in these 2 websites. It was in Klassekampen in Norway, in Mediapart in France, in Publico in Portugal, Open Democracy in the UK, and I hope I'm not forgetting someone. So this was more of our story of getting like a European story that happened in Greece, but getting it to an as big European audience as possible.
We have a question from a member of the audience here.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you. Go ahead, please.
Hi, wonderful. Hi, Stavros. My name is Elle. I'm based here in California, Los Angeles. Have experience covering refugee situation in Jordan many years ago. And so I'm curious to see, my question was, what sources would you recommend for journalists to connect with to get the full scope of what's going on in Greece or in Europe in general from your experience, considering that, for example, myself, if we can't physically be there, what would be the go-to sources from your experience?
All right. Hi, El. One source I would mention, like I would totally recommend, is called Refugees Deeply. This, unfortunately, they have stopped publishing, but they covered the first years of the refugee crisis here in Greece, and they have made some really amazing work, in-depth investigative work. They were also the ones who started uncovering the issue with the misuse of EU funds for the refugee crisis. Then I would say the Guardian. They have good coverage because they commission journalists who are based here in Greece, so they follow up the news and the updates, and they have very, very good sources. And then I would say Der Spiegel in Germany. They usually publish most of the articles also in English, if that's more convenient, and they have very good coverage also. So I would say these 2 media they do really trustworthy and really in-depth work that wouldn't stay only in the news and what happened, but they do some long-form nice stories.
A question about how Greek media is covering this. Now, there are both public and private news media in Greece, and there's in the United States we have all private, and we have some that have editorial stances against the government and some in favor of the government. What kind of play on this story do you find in Greece?
Yeah, so in Greece, when we talk about public media, we talk about government media. That's not only an issue with this government, but it was with the previous ones also, and it will be also with the next ones. So you can imagine that all the issues that we have talked about today, you wouldn't really see them that highlighted in the public media. Public media will mostly focus on like successes from the government in all kinds of sectors. So this also includes the media coverage of refugees. As it matters, like the private media, it's again the government. I wouldn't say control, but I would say influences the major TV news channels. So you would again not see that much of damning reports or like accurate reports about problems that are real and they exist. And then there are some smaller investigative outlets, usually websites, that they do cover, they do in-depth work. But again, the problem there is that they don't have the readership that would enable them to have a bigger impact. So you have like small media doing really good work about it, spending, I don't know, weeks or months on stories, uncovering important issues, but you don't see the impact. I was talking with a friend who is in the Netherlands, an academic, and he just told me that, you know, like if these things were uncovered in the Dutch government, this kind of corruption stuff or misuse of funds, of giving contracts to friend companies. And so if one of these was, you know, revealed in the Netherlands, some minister would have to resign. Here, it's not the case. It's smaller outlets uncovering things that most people will never hear about.
Now, by implication, you're being moderately critical of the government there yourself. How does that blow back to you? Is that can you translate blow back into Greek?
Yeah.
How does it rebound to you?
I would say that they don't care, you know, like, but
they
again,
they don't care, you said?
No, they don't care. It's okay for them. Like, so for the past year, like before I used to cover other sectors also. For the past year, I have been covering only refugees in Greece. The Ministry of Migration, they have never answered to any request that they have made to them. They have never answered to, you know, like not to the difficult questions like, how do you explain this or comment on this issue? But they haven't even answered to, you know, a request for numbers. If you ask them how many people live there, they will not answer. They don't feel this kind of responsibility, and at the same time, they don't care, you know, like they don't feel that they can be damaged. What is interesting for them is that they, and this also goes for the previous governments, they are kind of afraid from foreign press, which is impressive. So sometimes I would say a media request, and ask, I don't know, 3 things from them, and they wouldn't answer after a week. And when I collaborate with some colleague and I ask them to ask them, and they have some, I don't know, more aggressive stance, then they will have the answers in 2 days, maybe.
There was a German documentary crew arrested covering this story recently. Wasn't there? Been some other examples of that sort of thing?
Yeah. This has been happening. I mean, they are getting more and more aggressive. I think I'm not an activist, but from my view, as I try to see things quite moderately, it's just an effort to, you know, to scare people. So they have been arresting people for no reason. They have been intimidating people. When I was in Lesbos reporting, they arrested a friend of mine who clearly showed his, you know, journalist ID and said that I'm here as a journalist. They arrested him. They brought him to the police for some hours. They have been doing it, and it's, you know, they don't hide it. So I would say that it's maybe an effort to scare people, and so that somebody will think that next time they will not go there to cover these issues. But it's not working at the moment, to be honest.
Do the government, the official sources, do they talk to to foreign press, particularly the big players? If the New York Times covers the story, do they get answers that you don't get?
The New York Times always gets answers that I don't get. Yeah. I would say the major international media, they get answers. They don't get very precise answers, but they do get more than I do. But again, they very often it's, you know, it's very generic answers. So, for example, in the case of the pushbacks that we talked before, Der Spiegel and Bellingcat, they have published I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 different reports about them with very detailed info, with photos, with videos, with geolocations. And they have always asked the ministry to comment. The ministry has never commented on the given things, but on the presented proof, but they just provide some generic answer. So they answer to them, but I wouldn't say that they, but that they give answers.
Speaking philosophically, is there an answer? Can Greece handle the problem that it must handle? Can the other countries in the region handle this problem? Can they do it?
That's a great question, and in my opinion, things in the EU, they don't work as they should. So, for example, you have people stuck in the islands. The people that are staying in the 5 Aegean islands in horrific conditions. That I think that what they say, what the refugees themselves say, that even if you arrive in Lesbos and you are perfectly sane in your mind, this place can drive you crazy in 2 days. Because it's people living next to each other. It's dirty. You don't have access to anything. So this condition is a reality. It's very troubling, and it's not only Greece's fault, for example. So this is a treaty that has been signed between the EU and Turkey, which says that when someone arrives in the islands, they have to stay there for as long as their asylum application is processed. That's a good, it could be good if a process could take 1 month or 2 months, but when it takes 2 months and when you have limited space and more people arrive, that means that somebody has to stay for 2 months, for 2 years, that 20 people have to stay for 2 years in a place that is made for 3 people. That's not the Greek issue, that's an EU issue, but it has been still going. It's from March of 2016, and it hasn't changed. So I would say that Greece hasn't received the support that it should from the European Union. The European countries have closed their borders. So this is clearly an EU issue.
The training that Solomon is providing to the refugees, has it helped any of them to get to get any money to get out of the camps, or at least to reach a larger audience?
The labs that we have made in the past, they were in Athens. So they were, because they needed physical presence. So they were for refugees that were in Athens, not in the camps. Some of them, like in some labs, the people who participated, they already had some journalistic experience. So these people, I know that they have still been working on like documentaries, and as photojournalists, I know that they have been still like in the business. But it's not people from the camps. So it's not people. It's usually people that have been transported from the islands to the mainland. So they are on a different level of their life.
They've made progress toward a permanent asylum in Greece at that point. That was my next question. Is anybody getting out of there? Is there integration happening?
Integration is not happening. The most obvious example I would say is that you would see people who have been in Greece for 3 to 4 years and they don't speak a word of Greek. So I wouldn't say that integration is a priority for the government or for the EU as well, because all these programs that are supposed to work for the integration of the people, they also work on a temporary basis. So you would have one program beginning this year, but it would stop this year. You would have classes provided to people in this area, but you wouldn't have it the next year. It's not really, like well structured as you would see with a long-term plan. It's more like people that manage to like integrate, to maybe get a job, to rent their own place, to do things. It's mostly through their own will and through the will of some organizations, the aid of some organizations. I wouldn't say that there is any measure taken for integration of these people, like for their professional integration, for becoming part of the communities where they live into. Another example that you would maybe find interesting is that in many places, the refugees, are transported to the most remote areas possible. So you would bring some refugees, for example, in one county, as you would say, to one geographical area, but you wouldn't have them live in the city among the other people, but you would place them 100 kilometers far. So there would be no interaction with the local communities. So there is no hope for integration.
The local community doesn't want the interaction. Do the migrants, do they want to be Greeks?
Most of them, they have the idea, to be honest, that they will continue to some other European country. So this sentiment is very strong. And you would also see some resistance maybe from their part that, why should I learn Greek? Because in 2 years I will be in Germany. There's a clear there's a clear lack of information there, because it's not made clear to people that, maybe some will have to stay in Greece. Most want to go to Germany or the Netherlands, but some will have to go to Greece. The examples that we see from people who have integrated, I would say, again, it's from their own will. So today, for example, we met for a piece a guy who arrived here as an unaccompanied minor in 2017, and the discussion I did with him was in Greek. But I would say that's it's not the rule, it's the exception.
Just for the record, why do they prefer Germany and the Netherlands to Greece?
Because Greece is not very attractive for someone to live in as a foreigner or somebody who was to work, and they have also the traffickers in big part. They have given them this idea that Germany is some kind of paradise. So and especially Germany, that's also something very interesting. It's always about Germany. Like in 80% of the cases, it's Germany. They are told that, and they know that they will have better work opportunities there, that they will have better help from the system there. And what we see also, like comparing to Germany, is that there are real efforts for integration. People will go to schools, and people will enter the communities that they live into, and they will also have a better professional future than here.
Now, in the work you're doing for Solomon, I don't know if we can help you, but is there anything you need, any kind of resources or assistance that you need to continue this work? Or another way to ask the question is, are you in danger of being shut down?
We have been not doing very well financially, like on this kind of aspects. So it's quite tough, like as I said, in Greece, the opportunities are quite limited. So we are not, we don't have this secure ground, on which we can stand and, focus only on working. So a lot of work during our days has to go to how can we get more money, and how can we, get more money so that we can pay more freelancers to do good work, and how can we offer better rates than the rates offered from the majority of the Greek media. It's a quite unstable environment. I would be frank about it. It's tough, and a big part of our days is making it to the next month.
We pause while every journalist in the audience says, "Oh yeah, I know about that." Yeah. All right. But speaking of which, how long have you been a reporter? Where do always in Greece or this sort of area? And how long have you been slugging it out this way?
Yeah, I started 7 years ago, like in the university with some internships. When we talk about internships in Greece, it's mostly unpaid. I'm not sure how it's in the US. And you would maybe have to do 2 or 3 different internships unpaid. So you do this, like, I think it's the same in every country, like for exposure and to learn the work and everything. Then I worked for like some other outlets here. For 3 years, I worked for Inside Story, which is, it's the only subscription-based investigative digital outlet based in Greece. I worked for 3 years there, and last year I quit, and I just now I write for Solomon and for foreign media. It's what I said before, like many colleagues will prefer to be based in Greece and write for foreign media because it pays much better.
I'm smiling, Stavros, because I think other people in our audience are smiling. You are us. I mean, so many of us, we have made these same choices. And just speaking as I had a long career along with a lot of ups and downs, but I wouldn't have changed it, and you probably wouldn't change it either. I have one last question. It's a tradition on these talks that we ask this. What does press freedom mean to you?
Press freedom means that an outlet which would be maybe in favor of some political party, of a government, of economic interest, will be able to publish a story against this government, political party, or economic interest. Like that, this kind of stories would live to be in the front page, or I don't know, in the website of an outlet that is actually are actually in favor of this interest.
Do you feel that that's true of your career now?
Excuse me?
Do you think you're in that situation? Are you?
No, I don't think so. But I think that the real, the kind of honest press freedom is exactly this. When, one newspaper which is in favor of, I don't know, one official, for example, or of a party, will run a story because it's important for the sake of the people, it's important for the sake of public good. So this will be like true press freedom. I wouldn't say that it's, it's a different level, but I wouldn't be satisfied if journalists are not put in jail and arrested. I think that we have to aim for something better and for something that really serves the communities. I mean, journalism is for the people, first of all.
Do you think the people of Greece support you?
No, I don't think so. I know that they are furious and they are very angry to the media, but I haven't seen this anger being creative. At the moment, it's more like generalizing. It's all the journalists are bad. They wouldn't care that we talked about these unpaid internships and how people struggle to make ends meet. But in the mind view of most Greeks, I would say that they think that journalists are corrupted and they all have a Ferrari.
I missed that. Thanks very much. Our thanks to Stavros Malichudis for an interesting discussion and an interesting look at the work he and Solomon are doing in Greece, covering the refugee situation. The next IC talk will be December 15th at 6 p.m. That's Eastern US time, when we look at the global nature of press freedom. We will be discussing the global reach and impact of the US's First Amendment and Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Our guest will be Sanford J. Unger, director of the Georgetown University Free Speech Project. Mr. Unger was a previous IC Talk guest when he discussed the threats to the editorial independence of Voice of America in his role as a former VOA director. If you have not received an invitation to the session, please let us know at spj.internationalcommunity@spj.com or gmail.com. Boy, that's what it says here. Or you can visit us on our Facebook page. Just search for the SPJ International Community. Again, many thanks to Stavros and to all of you for joining us this evening. Be careful and stay well.
Thank you very much, Steve. Bye-bye.